that's sometimes like the irony that people who need something the most, this is what they put out. Like I really needed career support.
When did we decide to work together?
I remember us folding laundry together and like just joking around, how funny it would be to work together. Welcome to How Did You Get Into? Today is a very special episode for me because my life and business partner Malte will be interviewing me and asking a bunch of questions how I got into starting Fired Up. This is, to be honest, like a blind spot of mine because I have a hard time like keeping a timeline. I wouldn't even like be able to like say exactly when it started, just because like things have always been very, focused to the moment for me. So I'm curious about like the question that Malte will ask, and also like getting to the dynamic because we're not only a couple in life, but we're also like business partners. So this is obviously something that we're very interested about, like how our relationship has developed over working together. I'm really looking forward to have you here today, and more so, please let us know how you like this episode because we're trying something new here.
We're mixing things up a little bit today, and you will be the person who gets interviewed. We had one of our guests opt out last minute, and so we decided to basically turn tables. And, I think one of the things people would be really interested in is hearing the story of how you started Fired Up.
How many times have you heard the story yourself?
I heard it from different angles. Certainly more than 10 times, but I'm curious for the official version that gets sort of like saved for posterity now.
And I always save like a detail that you don't know, so I can just keep surprising you with new details.
True.
The origin story of Fired Up, it started with me being unemployed myself.
When was that?
That was when my daughter was a year old. I separated from her father, as you know, and then was registered at a job center receiving Hartz-IV. At the time, it was still like even had like a bigger stigma on it, and had basically no clue what I wanted to do. And this is where I did a coaching with another provider and was a bit shocked by how square this whole format was.
And this was a coaching through job center, right?
Yes, so exactly. Yeah, when you tell a story so many times, then you forget to like tell
give
context. So
yeah.
Thank you for that. So it was through Job Center. I received this coaching. I think it was like founder coaching because I was aware that as a single mom with a child, I will not be able to be employed somewhere. Did this coaching, and this person sitting in front of me just basically looked at my CV, or what was supposed to be my CV, and couldn't make any sense of it. But she didn't, really focus on me as a person. And that is what I thought was missing in this whole experience.
And how did that feel at the time?
It felt super weird. I went to her, newly bought house on the outskirts of Berlin. And it felt like, this is kind of the proper way. Like she did everything right as a coach. This is, what you're supposed to look like in your, 40s or 30s. And I felt like a failure myself. And in the same time, I was aware, like, why do I need to feel like a failure? I didn't do something wrong. It's just kind of like life, like life isn't like the straight line where everything looks good all the time. But sometimes you find yourself in change and mess. And I was in this mess of like not having a clue what to do next. I was kind of trying to like navigate it all.
And what happened then? You do the coaching and you start Fired Up right away, or were there some steps in between?
I felt inspired to change that and to come up with something. And first I started to work as a coach for other providers, but also felt that there were like a lot of regulations. And, there was like more the focus on like the CV side and not so much on like, I would say, the human-centeredness. And so slowly, I got into like working for another provider where I started to invite other coaches who had like a similar approach into the mix, and then, started this educational provider that we're doing now together.
So Fired Up was very much born from this experience of frustration and, something missing in that coaching. And that very much informs the DNA of the company, right? Based on those experiences, what would you say distinguishes Fired Up to this date from other educational providers in this field?
There's two parts in that. One is the frustration that you just mentioned. I think that is sometimes like there's another angle in coaching where coaching is a lot about, focusing on the positive. What is your purpose? What is your vision? What is your value? So it like really looks at the positive. But I think there is also an opportunity in coaching to look at the negative, on the frustration, on what you sure know that you don't want to do. So I think that is like part of the DNA of Fired Up, that we don't look away from like the hard stuff and also give that a space. And then on the other hand, like I think the overall difference with Fired Up to others is that, we are human-centered and not like CV-centered. The CV is like just an outcome of, like who we are as a person.
Can you tell a little bit the story of like how the company developed from like cooperating with another education provider for the regulatory side to then, starting it yourself, and the different coaches were there at the beginning and the relationship and how that evolved over time?
I mean, I don't know if you ever saw like the original Excel sheet that we had. Like we really started with like one Excel sheet, putting the names. A system of records, one sheet. Yeah, you saw that, like with all of the names of the coaches, and we were tracking everything there, like starting date, end date of coaching, like everything that now we have like this kind of complex CRM for was like one sheet. So that was the beginning. It was people that I knew, coaches that I, had in my network, friends of mine. So I think it was very self-made. I mean, the beginning, the first meetups that we had as coaches, we were like sitting in this living room on the carpet because I didn't have furniture. It was very kind of like just doing instead of like planning.
And when did we decide to work together? How did that all come about?
It's all here in this place. I remember us folding laundry together and like just joking around of, how funny it would be to work together. And it kind of started as a joke, I think. That's how I remember it. And then, we came back to this joke a lot. Like, hey, this is what I could do. Yeah, this is what we could do together. And we actually realized, and I think it was already there, but we just started to speak it out, that we complement each other a lot. Also work-wise, that we have like very complementing skills. That's how I remember it. I don't know, what's your memory of that?
I remember that scene as well. I think you asked me like right when you did the certification. I think you said like, hey, quit your current job, just do this with me. I think that was more like it wasn't real for us at that time. And then sort of like when we sort of like were joking around, and I think I was helping with like a few things then, so it just became a bit more real.
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't know if other people do the same, but like sometimes a joke helps lead the way because, it was more, it's
like a playful way of exploring ideas, sort of like in quotation marks or in brackets.
Yeah, and then we were like doing these official meetings with each other, and we had like, okay, then we will go, we will have like this meeting, and we actually speak it through.
Topics. Yeah,
I think that's sometimes like the hard part of like being a couple and running a business together, is that you need to carve out those moments that are kind of like real, or I don't know, not real, that are serious, yes, and are not part of your ongoing conversation, and you carve that out.
Yeah, especially at the beginning, right? When you sort of like assign responsibilities and have certain expectations. Because it wasn't clear that it would work out, right? When we started 1.5 years ago.
Yes, and it was scary, I think, for me because I think like starting Fired Up was very existential for me. I mean, I had like a 3-year-old daughter at home. There was COVID. I didn't have childcare, so it was very existential and real. And so opening up and giving this up a little bit, like kind of like my baby, let's say, and opening the doors, I think like was a scary thing as well. I mean, I saw the need. I saw that we complement each other, but it was also. Was a tough decision.
Giving up some degree of control? Yeah.
Control, and I think also of like the identity of I'm a single mom, I'm like a sole business owner, like, I'm doing this all by myself.
Yeah.
I think that I can always relate with clients or people who are saying that they have a hard time asking for help, because if you're like so used to like doing everything by yourself, it becomes an identity.
Yeah.
Or something that just works,
Yeah. That's a good point. And can you tell a little bit about the situation, sort of like when we started working together and how the company has developed over the last 1.5 years?
I basically don't have any clue about numbers any longer. So you should tell. No, but I think this is like one big change, that we could really distribute roles, and you took over all of the stuff that was really hard for me to like take care of, just because I don't have so much of an interest in it, and also like isn't part of, I think, my strong spots. So yeah, I think we grew a lot basically, right?
And yeah, that's true. So like, what are you focused on now, and how sort of like your experience of work changed?
I mean, it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but I do think that, or at least in my experience, it was hard to put like the human side and like these kind of like more soft skills under the same hat as like the awareness of the business model. So yeah, like having, talks with coaches, with our coworkers, making sure that, like the vibe is right. I really care about like the vibe of Fired Up. It's something that isn't tangible. Basically,
internally and externally?
Yeah, basically all the intangible stuff. And in the same time to have like, like the numbers in mind was super challenging for me. So I'm so happy that we could like literally like divide this.
It's really an amazing success story, going from starting this with an Excel sheet with a few friends, banding together, to now we are a company, work with over 70 coaches. We have a team of 7-8 employees. We work with 1,000 people this year. What advice would you give to people who want to start their own company in Germany?
I think I could have asked for help earlier. I think like one thing that held me back from asking for help was this idea that, you have this precious idea, and if you start to share it with others, they will take the idea and run away with it. And I think what I've learned is that, the value doesn't lie so much in the idea. I mean, we all have great ideas. There's so many great ideas. I think like we have multiple great ideas, in a week. But like, yeah.
It's more about the execution.
Yeah, the value really lies in the execution. So I think like going out way earlier with like a crafty thing and trying it out, getting feedback. I think like that's also like what I did from the beginning. Not caring so much about the perfection of the things, but just putting things out, correcting.
Bias towards action.
Yes, very much so. And I would do that again and even do so more.
Mm-hmm. So if I would sum it up, bias towards action, that's something you'd recommend. Focus on execution rather than ideation, and getting help, bringing other people when you have the feeling that you get traction for your idea. Basically what we're doing with this podcast. I mean, I think that's something we compare ourselves like with these big podcasters, right? That are doing it so effortless and easy. And that helped me back in like launching a podcast, I think for the last 4 years. Probably because I would always like compare like the idea that we had to like these amazing ideas out there. But yeah, I think there's no other way than just doing it and learning, getting feedback from people, and then improving with the next episode. Mm-hmm. Before we started working together, the team was really quite small, right? You had, I think, 2 people at that time who both worked part-time. And since then, we attracted this amazing team. What was that experience like? And from, doing so much yourself to now having a team with clearly distributed roles, and also the responsibility of engaging with that team and building a certain team culture. Yeah, we actually spent, I think, the last quarter a lot of time with our team. We had this offsite, we did this loop journey together where we focused on the roles. So yeah, we did spend a lot of time and empathize more on this. I'm really, really happy where we are with our team. I mean, it's a funny moment when at the beginning of starting a business, you wear all of these hats and you're not even aware of all of the things that you do every day. Mm-hmm. And then once they're so articulated and people own these roles and you're not owning them anymore, that's a very, very nice moment. And also when you see people doing a better job with these roles than you would do, and really like giving this role up and seeing somebody do it better than you could do it. How would you say has our partnership shaped the company? And conversely, how has the company shaped you as a person? And us as a couple as well? Yes. Yes.
I mean, we don't know how our relationship would have developed if, we wouldn't have started to work together. We don't know. But I think what Fired Up has done for us as a couple is that we have a lot of time to joke around every day. I mean, before that, obviously, like when you were kind of like leaving home to go to work, we would only have like those evenings together, let's say, and the weekends, and it's like just less time. So somehow like having so much more time together, I think like, made us develop like, a lot of fun together. I think this is what we got from Fired Up. And that on the other hand, like I think like on the contradictory to that, I think like the first thought that I had about like how Fired Up shaped me as a person is like this kind of responsibility aspect that is more heavy.
24/7.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's this light side, this joking side that I think we also use to like balance up things. And then on the other hand, like just because like Fired Up has grown to the extent that it has, like I feel, and I think maybe you as well, like we feel a lot of responsibility, right? Like we're aware that this is not a gig that we would start, like finish or stop any day because it affects,
many people's lives, right?
Many people's lives.
Coaches,
and we're aware of
colleagues.
that. And that can sometimes feel heavy, but it's also similar to, I think, like the fact of having a, like being a mother to my daughter, that this is not something that you just like stop because it doesn't feel pleasant at any day.
Yeah.
So just this, I think, like dedication and, I don't know, sticking to something. Before, I think like something that I've heard a lot about me, especially from my mother, my mom, is that I am like a wind, like a leaf in the wind. So, I just change interests. I never had a hobby that I stick through, which now I wouldn't say it was like a bad thing because I was just like a very explorative, curious mind. But I do think that I've developed more like this kind of like sticking through with something.
Perseverance.
Yes. Even when it gets hard and annoying and boring.
I
think like, which it does. I mean, obviously now we're doing this podcast that looks nice and we're having like this conversation. But in the end, like a business is like coming back to like the same computer, to the same inbox, to the same tasks, to the same to-do list. I mean, it changes, but every day. And it's not exciting every day. There are these moments that are interesting, but many moments are just, just things you have to do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can get also like lost in like podcasts and I don't know, LinkedIn posts.
Glorification of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that it looks so like interesting and you have like all these strategic, creative sessions and you meet all these interesting people. I mean, it happens, but that's not your business, right?
Usually, I mean, in reality, you're most of the time 10, 12 hours at your desk doing things. Just getting things done.
Exactly. Especially like now that we're like a bootstrapped business, we don't have investors' money so that we can just like endlessly hire people. I mean, we're so involved operationally.
Yeah, and we like the default, right? If something is not working, if somebody's sick, we just basically do
changing. Like I don't know, I learned so much about IT stuff. I mean, that's a job that I could apply for if ever we stop doing Fired Up. I could apply for like an IT
CRM specialist.
No, not specialist. I'm more like a
IT journalist.
Yeah, like a housemeister. I think I can apply like as a housemeister at any company, just like doing things all the time, like being an assistant, basically being an assistant, which was based, by the way, like one of my dream jobs as a child was like being a secretary. And I feel like I'm the secretary of like Fired Up.
If you weren't leading Fired Up, what would you be doing instead?
I mean, that was like a very painful question for me for all of my 20s. I did not study anything. I don't have like this kind of clean linear CV as we, I think, established. So I really had no clue what I could do with, with my talents. I didn't even know what my talents were. So this question was really, really painful for all of my 20s. So I wouldn't be able to answer it before Fired Up. But now that I kind of like learned all of these things through being an entrepreneur, I would be very curious to apply for like sales positions because I actually explored that I really enjoy sales. And I really like marketing. I really like telling a story or making a story scene. But yeah, obviously, I don't know what I would have done without Fired Up. I think that's sometimes like the irony that people who need something the most, this is what they put out. Like I really needed career support. So I started like a company that was about career support.
You provided the solution to a problem you saw.
Yeah, I really had this problem. And so that's also like why it was always so important that Fired Up is not like this kind of coach that knows it all on the pedestrian, but somebody that is really eager to understand.
And at an eye level and relatable.
Yes.
Yeah. And also solution oriented, right? Not some castle in the sky, but providing actual value to clients.
Exactly. Because really understanding, really having felt like the pain yourself.
What do you remember as our first official day of working together?
I'm really bad with these types of questions. I feel like a goldfish. I forget like things so quickly. I think you should answer this. I couldn't like pinpoint like a moment.
Yeah, so I remember there was sort of like my job was mostly remote, the job that I quit. And so I was still working at that job a little bit when we started working together. But I think the first thing I took over was like accounting and writing invoices. And then I remember the first real like hard day of work was like cleaning up the 2023 accounting. To get an overview of like who was paid, who hasn't been paid. I remember, and sort of like felt like something you really didn't want to do. And, kept that accounting part ever since.
So your first your first day of work was like coming to the mess that I've created, right?
Yeah, a little bit. But it also quickly became a lot of fun to work together. I think we very early established that we can be very serious if we have to get things done, but that we had this just level of humor and engaging with each other. I think otherwise it would also be quite tough just to spend the amount of hours with these like in part like very bureaucratic things. But I think we quickly established this like humorous way of working together, which was great.
But this is really like a great example of where we complement each other, because like just from our personality type, like when, for example, like doing invoicing, I'm like, yeah, that's good enough. Like there is a number, like the other person knows what's the story, they will understand. I can understand it. And like you're very like detail oriented, exact, thinking things through. I mean, it's just like we're so different in that way.
That's true. What's important for you when we hire people?
Good question. That's the business that we're in, helping people land jobs. I'm very aware of like how our hiring process, because obviously it's like kind of like a meta process of what we are doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, since we're still a very small team, I think it matters a lot that we are like there's a personality fit, that we just like get along. That mm-hmm. I think like for me in the leadership role, it's super important that I can have like a good relationship to the person, that we can talk mm-hmm. to each other. So like all of like, I would say like the vibe check, that we just get along and it feels natural. I think what's very important for me, that work doesn't feel like this state that you have to like push yourself in, but it just feels natural. So I think that's super important for me, like on the more vibe side of things. Mm-hmm. And then on the more requirement skill side, that's again like where I'm very happy that you're always like, looking at CVs and seeing. I think like you have like always a good way of like reading people's CV and path in life.
Yeah, although I'd say we're not super CV focused, right? Like we're very much like skills focused, and we don't really care that much where people acquire those skills or if they went to a certain university or not.
But you're reading into like the skills that people would also like get from, I think like not linear
transferable
kind of
skills from other areas,
or just life decisions. Like working in a different country, or like I don't know, like all these things that you can also read in a CV.
Yeah, I think another thing we did more recently is that we sort of like hire roles when we see the need, obviously, but then also when we sort of like define the role, right? When we have a very good idea of what the tasks are going to be, we can sort of like model out, how many calls you would need to do, etc. And then we can define the role well, and then look for the right person. I think that really changed from having these more generalist roles where everybody has to do everything a little bit to these more clearly defined roles.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm just thinking now, like that one of our team members is laughing that I never saw her CV. Mm-hmm, so she's like, not what's the English word? Like she's mocking me.
Yeah, she's mocking.
Yeah, she's mocking me with like, you don't even know what I've done in the past. Like when I'm surprised when like our team members meet and they talk like about past jobs, and I'm equally interested. Like, oh wow, you work there, and I actually just don't know it because I just like I just still look at CVs. Yeah, and this is like where I get help. Like we also like worked with like an external recruiter to help us with this, because I have like a blind spot there, or let's say like I'm just focusing more on like the personality. And then I'm glad that you or also like external person help us like also like look on more like the skill set.
Yeah. And both are important, specifically at the scale we're at. We've been pretty aligned with like hiring decisions, but from time to time, of course, we disagree. How do you think about conflicts and conflict resolution between the two of us?
I think what helps us in conflicts is that we both value like the complementary skills. I, for example, know that I can really trust your read on people. And I know that I can, for example, like be more excited about people, but in the same time, I can be wrong sometimes in how I read people, just because I think I'm more like kind of like emotional in that sense. So for example, I know that I can trust your read on people. And so when we have conflict, I know that I can rely on these certain things, and that even though I feel I have like, I'm right, I can like go back to, oh, but the past has shown that you have like a better track record of reading people. So I'll just trust you on that. So I think like this really helps like in conflict of like knowing which domain, and also like maybe connected to the role. Yeah. Kind of like one owns, right? Like for example, like I'm probably feel stronger about like our message and our marketing tone of voice. So that's probably when you have a different opinion where you're like, okay, that's yours.
Yeah, 100%. I'll describe it very similarly, that we have these domains that we focus on, and I trust you very much with these domains. And even if I completely would disagree with the decision, it would be like I disagree and commit because I trust you that in these domains, everything related to brand and messaging and the story we tell, I think that's really the DNA of the company. And
I think that is how also like working together has affected our private relationship, is that we are quite constructive when it comes about fighting. I think before I might have had a tendency of, lingering in the drama because it feels so alive. When you fight and the other person fights, it feels like, oh, they care about you. I mean, some daddy issue there of like, not getting the attention, and then drama is attention. So I think that's something like how also like working together has affected like my personal story to kind of fighting, is that it's more constructive in the way like we can disagree, we can also fight, but we know where to come back to, and we don't linger.
And I think it also gives you the freedom to say, hey, this is an important decision and I think I'm right and I want to convince you. And then at other times be able to say, I don't agree, but I trust you, I'm happy to just commit to whatever you decide. I think both things are really important.
Kind of like choosing your battles, right? Because you have like all of these things going on. So you decide, okay, this is one thing that I want to like focus on. And I mean, we can like fight tomorrow again about another thing. So I just let this one go. Yeah, I think it's good to like gain practice in fighting in any type of relationship, that you're good at it, so you don't need to, avoid things. But I feel like literally so safe and comfortable with you that I don't avoid any topic.
Yeah.
There's no like topic that I have to like dance around because I know, oh, this one might be like, I think that we can like freely move around.
Freely fight.
Which gives you freedom.
Yeah, it's true.
I think like one thing that I would also, recommend people who work together do more, and also like in relationships, is complement each other. I think we're very free with really like celebrating each other, like saying what we're doing good. Like I think also something that you might have learned through me is, appreciating yourself and appreciating the things that you do. Like just having a culture, even though it's like this culture here, that is like very much celebrating things. Because that also like gives room for conflict and for criticism. So I think that's something that people could do way more, is just complimenting each other, saying what they appreciate, and saying when something looks nice, being way more generous on that end. I mean, I'm curious, like if this also resonates, and if you have more ideas of like what helps in partnership and relationship when you work together. What has worked for you? Because we're still also figuring it out. Like we're doing this like for approximately 1.5 years now. And we're still learning and discovering. Yeah, I mean, we talked about like doing this today together, and we weren't sure like how to do this. Like, how was it for you?
It was interesting because it's navigating the formal requirements about, making a podcast, but then also having a conversation that's continuous with the way we actually talk with each other. So it's an interesting space because it's very familiar and then somewhat estranging at the same time, slightly artificial. But it's interesting to hear those stories again, even though I know most of your takes on things. I know most of the stories. It's always interesting to hear them as an actual prompt, as an actual answer to the question.
Which I guess is the challenge of being in any type of relationship, is like staying curious, even though you think you know what the other one is is about to say, right? That you don't already anticipate, and be surprised.
Yeah. And for you, what was the experience like for you?
I think it's interesting to have like the fourth wall, doing the speaking here together, but also I'm very curious, like how this lands with people. I'm very curious, what part speaks to others. I think like obviously anyone who does a podcast is interested in the audience, let's say, but especially now that it is like so personal, that makes me even more so curious. Today, this was a special episode of How Did You Get Into? Because we just improvised, and my partner, both business and life partner, Malte, asked me a bunch of questions about how I got into starting Fired Up. It was a fun and curious and playful session for me. I'm really, really interested how you liked it. Please let us know in the comments. I know everyone says to actually comment, but I'm really interested, genuinely interested in what you think. And also, if you want to see more of this, subscribe and share this with someone who maybe is in a similar situation, has started a business or wants to start a business.